Welcome to Roll Credits. This podcast was created with help from AI tools, so double-check your facts. Today, we're setting sail for one of the greatest journeys ever told. The spotlight is on the Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's epic journey into the world of gods, monsters, heroes, and one very long trip home.
It's a massive one today.
Absolutely massive. I mean, picture this, right? You've got Matt Damon. He's like 50 pounds underweight.
Yeah.
And he is shivering violently on a genuine Viking ship in the middle of the North Sea.
Just completely miserable.
Right. The weather is so violently chaotic that the crew is, quite literally throwing up over the side of the wooden hull.
Oh, man.
And right in the middle of this absolute misery, Christopher Nolan looks around, refuses to call cut, and just keeps these massive, roaring IMAX cameras rolling.
It is a phenomenal image to start with because, it perfectly encapsulates the sheer unprecedented scale of what we're looking at today.
Yeah.
We are breaking down a project that feels like it honestly shouldn't even exist in the modern Hollywood ecosystem.
Exactly. So for you listening right now, you are about to explore how Christopher Nolan took this colossal, blank check clout he earned from sweeping the Oscars with Oppenheimer, and he utilized it to adapt a 2,700-year-old foundational epic.
Right.
We are going incredibly deep into this material today. Our mission for this deep dive is to look at every single facet of this massive blockbuster, and more importantly, to understand why these extreme choices were made.
Yeah, we're going to unpack how Nolan took Homer's ancient myth and just completely re-engineered it into this PTSD-fueled exploration of war.
Right, and we'll also be looking at the staggering logistics of this production. We are talking about the unprecedented reality of shooting a movie of this immense scale, 100% on IMAX 70mm film.
Which brings its own chaotic set of engineering nightmares, as we'll get into.
Oh, totally. We will travel through the punishing global locations that push the cast and crew to their absolute physical and mental limits. And we'll break down the massive ensemble cast tasked with bringing the Bronze Age to life in a way we have, frankly, never seen before.
So to really understand the sheer gravity of this deep dive, you have to start at the genesis.
Right.
And the genesis here isn't the beaches of Troy. The true beginning of this story is actually 2 decades ago.
Yeah, this was a 20-year voyage just to get the green light, which is wild.
It really is. To give you some context, following Oppenheimer's massive success, 7 Oscar wins, just sweeping the board.
Right.
Nolan was basically handed a golden ticket by the studios, a $250 million budget.
Which is just an absurd amount of money.
Completely. Emma Thomas, his producing partner, actually went on the record to point out that absolutely no studio in their right mind greenlights a 2,700-year-old poem without that kind of massive prior box office triumph.
Right. She's entirely correct. You don't just stroll into a corporate boardroom today, ask for $250 million, and say, I'd like to adapt a required high school reading assignment from ancient Greece.
Yeah, exactly. That level of capital requires an immense foundation of trust.
Yeah.
But what is truly compelling about this timeline is that Nolan didn't just dream this up in the afterglow of his Oscar sweep. He first circled this mythological world 20 years ago.
Wait, really? 20 years?
Yeah. Back in the early 2000s, he was actually attached to direct the 2004 film Troy, the one based in the Iliad.
Oh, wow. Before Wolfgang Peterson eventually took over and made that massive sword and sandals version with Brad Pitt.
Precisely. And Nolan has openly admitted that he felt completely in over his head back then.
I can imagine.
He's a much younger filmmaker, still building his visual vocabulary, right? And the sheer logistical weight of a Bronze Age siege just felt overwhelming to him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But even as he stepped away from the project, he held on to a singular defining image from that development process. He spent a lot of time agonizing over how you possibly present the Trojan horse to a modern audience.
Right, because we all know the trick. It's ingrained in our culture. How do you make that massive wooden horse feel credible, dangerous, and real, rather than just like a punchline?
Because if it looks goofy, the entire premise of the war just falls apart.
Yeah, totally.
So the image he crystallized in his mind, the one he held on to for 2 decades, was the Trojan horse listing over in the sand on a deserted beach.
Okay.
And he said it resembled the ruined Statue of Liberty at the end of the original Planet of the Apes.
Oh, man. That is an incredible visual.
Right.
It takes this symbol of military genius and instantly recontextualizes it as a relic of a destroyed civilization. But, holding on to a single image for 20 years, it's like a master illusionist keeping one specific card palmed in his hand for 2 decades, just waiting for the exact right theater to play it.
That's a great way to put it.
But I do have to push back here a little bit. You hand Nolan $250 million. You give him the biggest cameras on Earth. Does that massive budget actually risk burying the very human, intimate element of Homer's poem under just a sheer avalanche of spectacle?
That's a fair question.
Because when the explosions and the set pieces get that big, doesn't the man at the center of it kind of get lost?
It is the core tension of any modern blockbuster, and it's a highly valid concern. But if we pull back and look at the larger architecture of Nolan's filmography, this material is actually the absolute perfect synthesis of his obsession.
Okay, so?
Think about the protagonists that populate his films. He has spent his entire career exploring isolated men desperately trying to manipulate space and time just to get back to their families.
Oh, right, like Cobb in Inception.
Exactly. Tearing through layers of his own subconscious just to see his children. Or think of Cooper in Interstellar, plunging into a black hole to get back to his daughter.
Yeah, that's so true.
These are men dealing with the crushing trauma of their own actions, desperate to reclaim the physical space they call home.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So the Odyssey isn't just another action movie for him. It's like the original blueprint.
It is the foundational text for those exact tropes in Western literature. He's taking his ultimate thematic obsession and tracing it all the way back to the headwaters.
Wow.
So while the budget is staggering, the emotional core is completely aligned with what he's always done best.
That makes the timeline of this so much more poignant. I was reading the sources, and they say he finally sat down and wrote the script in April 2024, literally right after the exhaustive Oppenheimer Oscar campaign wrapped up.
Yeah, he didn't waste any time.
And there's this incredibly vivid illustrative detail that really stuck with me. Nolan physically collapsing into Steven Spielberg's arms immediately after winning the Oppenheimer Oscar.
Such a powerful moment.
Yeah, that embrace, that sheer exhaustion and ultimate validation was kind of the moment this epic was truly set into motion. It's almost as if he needed to conquer the peak of Hollywood before he felt worthy of tackling Homer.
Well, and that exhaustion is critical to understanding the script he produced. When he finally retreated to write it, he was energized by a major realization about the source material.
What was that?
We all know Nolan is famous for radical, nonlinear structures. He loves stories within stories, timelines folding in on themselves.
Oh, definitely.
But he realized that he didn't need to impose his trademark structural tricks onto Homer. Homer's text already possesses that exact radical, nonlinear architecture.
Oh, right. Because the Odyssey does not start chronologically at the end of the Trojan War.
Exactly. It starts in media res, near the end of the journey, and the vast majority of the past is revealed through traumatic flashbacks and recounting.
I love that. And I also love that amidst all this high-minded structural theory, he playfully dubbed this project the ultimate dog movie.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Which is just a hilarious pivot for a director known for making some of the most self-serious cinema of the 21st century.
It really is.
Apparently, he finally got a dog in real life, a chocolate lab named Charlie, after his kids left home. And that personal experience deeply fulfilled his desire to include Odysseus's loyal hunting dog, Argos, in the film.
You know, it might sound like a trivial anecdote, but Argos is vital to the emotional grounding of the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
A creature waiting faithfully for its master for 20 years, only to recognize him through disguise. I mean, that is one of the most enduring, heartbreaking elements of the original poem.
It really gets you.
It proves that underneath the massive IMAX spectacle, Nolan is still tracking the emotional pulse of the characters.
So we have this perfect storm, right? A director obsessed with Homecoming, a 20-year incubation period, and a blank check. But Nolan didn't just copy and paste the poem into a screenplay format.
Not at all.
He completely fractured it and rebuilt it. If you're listening and you remember reading the Odyssey in school, you probably remember it as a fairly straightforward adventure. A guy goes from island to island, fights some monsters, outsmarts some witches, and gets home.
Right.
But Nolan shatters that clean narrative.
He absolutely does. He splits the narrative into 3 completely distinct, interwoven timelines.
Okay, break those down for me.
Sure. So you have a younger Odysseus, lost at sea immediately post-Troy, experiencing the brutal, visceral trauma in real time.
Okay.
Then you have an older, deeply weary Odysseus, trapped years later on an island, recounting his fractured memories to the nymph Calypso.
Right.
And simultaneously, you have Penelope, isolated back home in Ithaca, fighting a psychological war of attrition against a horde of aggressive suitors.
Wait, logistically, weaving 3 timelines like that in a summer blockbuster, doesn't that risk totally alienating an audience expecting a linear heroic journey? Like, why make it so difficult to follow?
Because the structural fracture directly mimics the psychological state of the protagonist.
Okay.
If Odysseus is suffering from profound PTSD, his memory isn't going to be a clean chronological timeline. It's going to be a shattered mirror.
That makes a lot of sense.
By fracturing the narrative, Nolan forces the audience to actively piece the reality together, putting us in the exact same disoriented, traumatized headspace as Odysseus himself.
And to further that trauma, he strips away the ultimate safety net of Greek mythology, which is the gods themselves.
Yes.
In the traditional texts, the gods are constantly bickering on Mount Olympus. They swoop down, they cast spells, they throw literal lightning bolts to solve problems or create obstacles.
Right, it's very magical.
But Nolan grounds this mythology into the dirt. The gods are mostly removed as physical, omnipotent beings.
Which is a huge departure.
Yeah. Instead, they exist as terrifying natural phenomena, whispered rumors among soldiers, or, and I think this is brilliant, as internal guilty consciences.
It's a subversive, brilliant choice. Take Zendai's portrayal of Athena, for instance.
Right. She plays the goddess of wisdom in war. But she doesn't descend from the clouds in glowing armor.
No.
She appears solely to Odysseus, almost like an apparition, and the script describes her presence primarily as a scowl of disapproval.
Yeah.
She's essentially a manifestation of his own intellect turning against him.
Exactly, and that represents a massive thematic shift from the ancient text to our modern understanding of psychology. Well, in the Bronze Age, the gods were an incredibly convenient excuse for horrific human behavior. If a king slaughtered a village, he can say, I didn't want to do it, but Ares filled me with bloodlust.
Right. Or Poseidon cursed my fleet.
Exactly. It absolved mortals of ultimate moral responsibility. By removing that divine, supernatural intervention, Nolan corners Odysseus. Odysseus has no gods to blame. He has to own his mistakes.
And the most catastrophic mistake of all is the one thing he is most famous for, the Trojan horse.
Yes.
This is the pivot that completely blew my mind in the research. In every traditional telling, the Trojan horse is framed as this unparalleled stroke of tactical genius. It's the ultimate heroic victory.
Right.
But Nolan flips the lens entirely and frames the Trojan horse as an unforgivable war crime.
And it's a war crime specifically because it violates the absolute most sacred law of the ancient world, Zizania.
Okay, we need to pause here. For anyone who isn't a classics major, let's break down exactly what Xania is and why it matters so much to this plot.
Gladly.
Yeah.
So, Xania is the ancient Greek concept of hospitality and is considered a law enforced directly by Zeus.
Okay.
You have to understand that the ancient world was a terrifying, disconnected place. There were no hotels, no safe highways, no police.
Yeah, you're on your own out there.
Right. If you were traveling and you knocked on a stranger's door, that stranger was morally obligated to take you in, feed you, bathe you, and protect you.
Wow.
And you, as the guest, were obligated to be respectful and peaceful. This mutual sacred trust is what allowed civilizations to trade, to communicate, and to basically survive.
Because the underlying fear was that the stranger at your door might actually be a god in disguise, right? Like testing your morality.
Precisely. To violate Xania was to invite the absolute wrath of the heavens. So apply that to the Trojan horse.
Okay.
The Greeks pretend to surrender.
Yeah.
They leave a massive wooden horse on the beach as a supposed gift to the gods and a token of peace. The Trojans, adhering to the spiritual customs of the time, bring this gift inside their impenetrable walls. By hiding armed soldiers inside the ultimate symbol of peace and surrender, Odysseus completely perverts the concept of trust. He doesn't just win a military siege, he fundamentally breaks the social contract that holds humanity together.
So when the Greeks burst out of the horse, it's not a glorious, triumphant battle. It's a slaughter.
Yes.
It's a brutal, chaotic pillage that essentially triggers the collapse of Bronze Age civilization. Odysseus's brilliance brings about the end of the world as they know it.
Which completely recontextualizes the rest of the journey. If Odysseus is carrying the guilt of having destroyed the very fabric of civilized trust, then the monsters he faces on his way home take on a drastically different meaning.
Definitely.
This raises an essential question for the film. What do monsters like the Cyclops or the Sirens represent if they aren't just magical beasts sent by petty, angry gods?
They become psychological projections. In Nolan's vision, they represent the absolute beastliness of men unleashed during wartime. I mean, we see Odysseus self-medicating with lotus flowers just to numb his own mind, just to forget the slaughter he orchestrated. The trauma, the PTSD of his own actions is the true monster hunting him. The physical monsters he encounters are almost externalized manifestations of the horrors that he and his soldiers have internalized.
And by modernizing the psychological underpinnings of the myth, Nolan allows room to critique the myth itself.
Yes. Which brings up my absolute favorite moment from the script notes. There's a moment of incredibly dry, dark comedy before the war even starts.
Oh, what I know what you're going to say.
Penelope, Odysseus' wife, is watching the men prepare their armor, and she just asks the most brutally obvious, sensible question that history seems to have ignored.
Yeah.
She asks, didn't Helen want to leave with Paris? Why are we fighting a massive, continent-spanning war over a woman who packed her own bags and left voluntarily?
It is a phenomenal moment that instantly punctures the inflated, heroic mythos of the Bronze Age.
Right.
With one question, Penelope exposes the sheer inanity of the situation. It points out that these men are going to war for ego, for pride, and for control over trade routes. But they are cloaking their bloodlust in the noble, poetic language of honor and divine right.
So if you are Nolan and you have stripped away the lightning bolts and the flying chariots and you are grounding this epic entirely in raw human trauma, guilt, and the psychological toll of war, you can't just cast standard action stars.
No, you really can't.
You need actors who can project an immense crushing human weight. You need a cast that can carry the sky without any CGI assistance. Let's dive into this ensemble, starting with Matt Damon as Odysseus.
Matt Damon is a highly calculated and subversive casting choice. Nolan has obviously worked with him extensively on Interstellar and Oppenheimer.
Yeah, they have a great track record.
And Nolan has previously described Damon as possessing this inherent, approachable boss energy.
That's a perfect description.
When you look at Matt Damon, you see the ultimate dependable everyman. You trust him instinctively.
All right, he's Jason Bourne. He's the guy we spent billions of dollars to save in The Martian. We want him to win.
Exactly. So to take that inherent audience trust and slowly corrupt it into trauma and guilt is a really powerful cinematic trick.
Yeah.
To embody this broken man, Damon underwent a staggering physical transformation. He dropped down to 167 pounds.
Which is wildly skinny for him.
He completely eliminated gluten from his diet for months, and he grew out a massive, unkempt, real beard for over a year.
No fake beards allowed.
Nolan was adamant. No artificial facial hair, no makeup tricks to simulate fatigue. He wanted the tactile, physical reality of a human body that has been battered by the sea and starved of comfort for a decade.
I can't even imagine the toll that takes on an actor's psyche. When you are physically starving, your posture changes, the cadence of your voice drops.
Yeah, it changes everything.
The exhaustion in your eyes isn't something you can just act out. Damon plays him as a guilt-ridden, hollowed-out leader. It completely strips away that wily, slick, silver-tongued charm that we usually associate with traditional portrayals of Odysseus.
Right.
He's not a trickster here. He's a haunted veteran.
And that physical and emotional depletion creates a stark contrast with the characters waiting for him back in Ithaca. You have Anne Hathaway as Penelope and Tom Holland as their son, Telemachus.
The dynamic there sounds incredible. Hathaway's Penelope is described as fiercely strong and deeply nuanced, but she is utterly trapped by the suffocating patriarchal traditions of her time.
Yeah, she's fighting a Cold War in her own living room.
And then you have Holland. The production notes said he was bounding around the set like a gazelle.
That's great.
He brings this kinetic, desperate, youthful energy to the role of a son who is desperately trying to find a father he doesn't even have a memory of.
The central tension between Hathaway and Damon's characters, even when they aren't on screen together, is the crushing weight of time. They have been separated for 20 years. That's a lifetime. The people they were when he left for Troy essentially no longer exist.
So sad.
And the supporting cast built around them really deepens the texture of this world. We touched briefly on Zendaya as Athena.
Hold on, I have to bring up the viral trivia surrounding her casting because it's just too good to ignore.
Oh, please do.
During a massive cast interview during the press tour, a journalist asked if Athena loved Odysseus romantically, given how often she intervenes to help him.
Right.
And without missing a beat, Tom Holland instantly jumps in, grinning, and says into the microphone, no, because she's married to me.
It was a fantastic moment of levity on a very intense press tour.
So funny.
But jokes aside, it's crucial to clarify Athena's actual role in this adaptation. As Damon elaborated in another interview, Athena is absolutely not a romantic interest.
Right.
She is a spiritual and psychological guide who profoundly respects Odysseus's intellect above all else. They share a purely intellectual connection.
Which makes her role as his internal guilty conscience so much more devastating.
Precisely. She represents the high-minded wisdom and foresight that he naturally possesses, but actively chose to ignore in the heat of war when he designed the Trojan horse.
Wow.
Every time she scowls at him, it is his own intellect reminding him that he knew better.
The antagonists and supporting players are just as meticulously crafted.
Yeah.
You have Robert Pattinson playing Antinos, the sleazy, aggressive leader of the suitors who have invaded Odysseus' home and are trying to force Penelope to marry him.
Yeah.
Pattinson's approach to this was wild. He didn't look at ancient kings for inspiration. He actually compared his performance to James Woods in the movie Casino.
That is such a specific pull.
Just a complete manifestation of slimy, predatory entitlement.
It's a brilliant modern anchor for the character. But the casting choice that carries the most narrative tragedy is Elliot Page as Sinon.
Okay, yes, this part of the script is just heartbreaking. Let's unpack Sinon because this is a massive twist on the original lore.
It really is. In the classical myths, Sinon is a Greek soldier who volunteers to stay behind on the beach when the Greek fleet pretends to sail away.
His job is to lie to the Trojans, to convince them that the giant wooden horse is a peace offering, and to manipulate them into dragging it inside their gates.
Okay.
He is traditionally portrayed as a willing, cunning, treacherous liar, a co-conspirator in Odysseus's grand deception.
But Nolan flips the script entirely. In this film, Sinon isn't a willing co-conspirator. He is a loyal soldier who is completely tricked by Odysseus.
Yeah.
Odysseus lies to him, telling him the army is retreating and he just has to deliver a message of peace. Sinon genuinely believes he has been abandoned on the beach.
Right, he has no idea.
He has no idea that the entire Greek strike force is hiding inside the horse directly behind him. So when he speaks to the Trojans, his fear and his earnestness are completely real.
Because he's not acting.
Exactly. And as a result, he is brutally slaughtered by the Trojans while completely oblivious to the fact that his own commander set him up to die as a pawn.
Wow. So Odysseus' trauma isn't just about the guilt of slaughtering the Trojans, it's about the horrifying betrayal of sacrificing his own loyal men through cold-blooded deception. That is an incredibly heavy emotional anchor. And rounding out the ensemble, we have Lupita Nyong'o taking on a dual role as Helen of Troy and her sister Clytemnestra.
This dual casting is vital. And I think it's also important to highlight Nolan's overarching approach to casting the ancient world here.
Yeah.
He actively utilized colorblind casting. He prioritized the emotional essence, the gravitas, and the psychological truth of the actors over the traditional, historically Eurocentric depictions of the Bronze Age that Hollywood has leaned on for decades.
It totally modernizes the accessibility of the film.
Furthermore, he fundamentally reevaluates the women of the myth. In older adaptations, women like Circe, Calypso, Penelope, and Helen are often reduced to flat icons, prizes to be won, or mere plot devices to hinder the male hero.
Right, they don't get much depth.
Exactly. In Nolan's script, they are imbued with full agency, complex motivations, and rich interior lives.
That's awesome.
When you watch Lupita Nyong'o perform as Helen, you aren't just looking at a beautiful face. You finally comprehend the immense, suffocating psychological burden of knowing that your very existence is the catalyst for a decade-long siege that is burning the world to the ground.
Okay, I am entirely on board with the psychological depth here, but I do have to push back on one specific casting choice that absolutely set the internet on fire when it was announced.
Oh, I know exactly who you're going to mention.
Travis Scott is in this movie. He plays a rapping bard. Now, I understand the comparison to Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, you know, the idea of using modern rhythmic cadence to convey historical storytelling.
Right.
But we're talking about a gritty, tactile, IMAX shot adaptation of ancient Greece. Does putting a modern rapper in the middle of the Bronze Age completely break the immersion? Like, does it risk alienating fans of the classic text who want authenticity?
It is undeniably a calculated, massive risk. However, we have to reconsider what authenticity actually meant in the Bronze Age.
Okay, tell me more.
Homer's epics were not quiet books. meant to be read silently in a library. They were the pinnacle of an oral tradition. They were performed.
Right.
They were sung, chanted, and recited rhythmically to captivated, rowdy audiences in firelit halls long before a single word was ever committed to parchment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The bards of the ancient world were the absolute rock stars of their day. They controlled the flow of information and entertainment.
Okay, so by casting a modern musical artist whose entire career is built on controlling the rhythm and energy of a massive crowd, Nolan is trying to translate the feeling of that ancient oral tradition for a contemporary audience.
Exactly. He is bypassing a dry, dusty historical reenactment to capture the visceral pulse of the performance.
That's actually pretty brilliant.
And to ensure that the entire cast, from the seasoned Oscar winners to the modern musicians, understood the exact gritty, tactile texture he was aiming for, Nolan assigned them mandatory homework.
Oh, I love director homework.
Yeah, before a single frame was shot, he made the cast watch a highly specific curriculum of films.
Let me guess the lineup. Knowing Nolan, it wasn't like other Greek mythology movies.
Far from it. He had them study Akira Kurosawa's Ran to understand how wind, weather, and sweeping landscapes become active characters in a tragedy.
Oh, wow.
He screened Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ to show them how to create an accessible, raw, and fiercely human window into ancient, mythic history.
Interesting.
And he showed them Andrei Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev to convey the mud, the suffering, and the profound spiritual endurance required to survive in a brutal era.
That curriculum makes absolute sense. You want the rhythm of a bard, the sweeping tragedy of Shakespeare, and the muddy, bloody reality of a peasant.
Right.
But here's the thing. You absolutely cannot achieve the texture of a movie like Ran or Andrei Rublev by standing your actors in front of a green screen in an air-conditioned studio in Burbank. You can't fake that kind of grit with pixels. You have to take these actors out into the unforgiving elements.
And that is exactly what Nolan demanded. He demanded absolute tactile realism, which resulted in a production schedule that sounds less like filmmaking and more like a military deployment.
Honestly, it sounds like a punishment.
Ah.
Let's pivot to the physical production because the logistics of the shoot are just staggering. We are talking about a grueling 91-day shoot spread across 6 different countries.
Yeah, Nolan's underlying philosophy on set is that the physical environment must dictate the performance.
Okay.
He believes that if you force an actor to endure the actual physical struggle of their environment, you strip away their acting tricks. The performance becomes an authentic survival response.
Well, to say it forced a struggle is the understatement of the century. Let's just track this geographical nightmare. They started in Italy and Sicily.
Right.
They chose the Castello di Santa Caterina to serve as the set for Ithaca, Odysseus' homeland. But there was a catch.
A very big catch.
To get to this ruined, picturesque clifftop castle, there was no road for vehicles. The entire cast and crew had to physically hike 45 minutes up a 900-foot jagged, rocky path
Oh, man.
every single day for 2 solid weeks. I want you, listening right now, to imagine having to hike up the equivalent of a 90-story skyscraper, carrying your gear, wearing leather sandals and heavy wool costumes before the director even calls action on your first scene of the day.
It sounds like an insurance liability, but Robert Pattinson actually spoke incredibly highly of this experience.
Really? He liked it.
He did. He noted that the daily 900-foot ascent acted as a profound equalizer for the production. It completely leveled the hierarchy.
Oh, because everyone had to do it.
Exactly. It didn't matter if you were a multimillionaire A-list star or a second assistant camera operator. Everyone had to endure the exact same lung-burning physical toll.
That's fascinating.
Pattinson said it mimicked a true mythic quest. It entirely stripped away the pampered Hollywood glamour and bonded the cast and crew through shared, undeniable physical trauma.
Wow.
When you see them panting and weary on screen in Ithaca, they aren't acting. That weariness is bone deep.
And the weariness only escalated from there. I mean, they traveled to Scotland to shoot the ocean sequences on the open North Sea.
Yeah.
And because Nolan refuses to use green screens if he can avoid it, they didn't just build a rocking boat set on a soundstage in a water tank. They chartered a real, full-scale, historically accurate Viking replica ship called the Draken Harald Hårfagre.
Filming on the open ocean is notoriously the most difficult thing you can do in cinema.
It's historically a nightmare.
And the weather in the North Sea was aggressively terrible. The water was violently choppy, the wind was freezing, and as a result, the cast and the veteran film crew got severely incapacitatedly seasick.
We're talking about people literally hanging over the side of the wooden hull, violently throwing up between takes. It was absolute misery.
Yeah.
And what did Christopher Nolan, the captain of this cinematic ship, do?
He kept the massive IMAX cameras rolling.
Wait, hold on. Let's stop right there. You're telling me he is watching his multi-million-dollar cast vomit and he just keeps shooting. How does a mutiny not happen?
Because he leads by example, and he asked for permission.
What do you mean?
Amidst the chaos, he gathered the cinematographer and the core cast, all of whom were suffering just as badly, and he simply asked them, can we keep going? Because the terror in your eyes right now is exactly what the film needs.
Oh.
And they agreed. That is a testament to the absolute dedication to the craft that Nolan inspires in his collaborators.
It is absolute madness, but you cannot argue with the results. To capture the bleakness of the underworld Hades, they traveled to Iceland.
Right.
They utilized the vast, desolate, black, volcanic sands of Hjörleifsjöfjall.
Which is a stroke of location scouting genius.
Right.
By using the black sands, Nolan provides an incredibly bleak, monochromatic, otherworldly landscape that feels like the realm of the dead, without needing to paint a single pixel of CGI in post-production.
It just looks naturally apocalyptic.
It is an alien world that actually exists on our planet.
And then for the crown jewel of the film, the city of Troy itself, they moved the entire circus to Morocco. They locked down the Sar of Eight Ben Haddou, which is this breathtaking, ancient, fortified village.
Yeah.
But they didn't just use the existing architecture. The production designers went in and built an additional 2.5 acres of massive practical structures, seamlessly blending them into the ancient mud brick. They built towering city gates, sprawling temples, and winding market streets.
The sheer physical scale of these sets is genuinely hard to comprehend in an era where most blockbusters are filmed in front of LED volume walls.
Totally.
There's a wonderful revealing anecdote from Tom Holland during the Moroccan shoot. He was standing on a dune looking down the beach, and he saw miles of Greek soldiers in full bronze armor. Hundreds of wooden boats pulled up on the sand, weapons, tents, and horses stretching as far as the eye could see down the coastline.
And he turned to a production assistant in total confusion and asked, where is the film crew?
Yep.
Because there were no green screens, no massive lighting rigs blocking the sun, no evidence of a modern movie set. Nolan had essentially funded and orchestrated a full-scale historical reenactment.
It's just wild. And finally, they traveled to Greece, appropriately, using Nestor's cave in the Peloponnese to shoot the terrifying Cyclops sequence, grounding the monster in the actual geology of the myth's origin.
So this brings us to the ultimate question. You have starved your actors, you have hiked them up mountains, you have sailed them into freezing storms, and you have built ancient cities in the desert. You have engineered this massive, tangible, gritty world. How do you actually capture it? Do you bring the biggest, loudest, most cumbersome cameras on the face of the earth? Let's get into the extreme engineering of this film, because this is where my mind was truly blown.
This is where the filmmaking process itself becomes an odyssey. The Odyssey is the very first feature film in the history of cinema to be shot entirely, every single frame on IMAX 70mm film.
Okay, we throw the word IMAX around a lot today. If you go to a local multiplex, you might see a movie playing in an IMAX theater, but usually that's just a digital projection on a slightly larger screen.
Right, it's not the real deal.
We need to explain this for the listener. What does shooting on IMAX 70mm film actually mean physically?
It is a phenomenal physical difference. Standard cinema film for decades was 35mm. It runs vertically through a camera, pulling down frame by frame.
Okay.
IMAX 70mm films, specifically 15 perforation IMAX, is entirely different. The physical strip of film is massive. It's so large that it has to run horizontally through the camera sideways.
Wow.
A single frame of IMAX film is roughly 10 times larger and holds exponentially more resolution than a standard frame of 35mm film. It creates a clarity, a depth of field, and a towering aspect ratio that digital cameras still cannot perfectly replicate.
But that massive size comes with a massive physical cost. The statistics are absurd. Over the course of the 91-day shoot, they ran 11 miles of physical film stock through these cameras.
11 miles.
11 miles of celluloid. And because the film is so wide and heavy, that 11 miles weighed 530 pounds. You were literally hauling half a ton of plastic around the mountains of Sicily.
Shooting entirely on this format is not just a stylistic format choice. It is a profound, foundational production philosophy that alters every single department on set. Because historically, there is one massive, glaring problem with IMAX cameras.
They are incredibly deafeningly loud
Oh, they are?
because you were pulling this massive, heavy strip of plastic sideways through metal gears at 24 frames a second. The mechanical film transport system inside the camera sounds like a gasoline-powered sewing machine or a chainsaw running on overdrive.
Exactly. In the past, on films like The Dark Knight or Dunkirk, Nolan could only use IMAX cameras for sweeping action sequences or establishing shots. He couldn't use them for quiet, intimate dialogue scenes because the mechanical noise of the camera completely ruined the live sound recording of the actors' voices.
So how did they solve it for this movie? Because this film is highly psychological. It's full of whispers, tears, and quiet confessions. You can't have a chainsaw running in the background while Matt Damon is crying.
To solve this, Nolan and his engineering team custom-built massive, soundproof blimps to completely house and encapsulate the IMAX cameras.
Basically, they built a lead-lined mini refrigerator to trap the camera inside so the microphone wouldn't pick up the noise.
Yeah, that's a good way to picture it.
But that brilliant engineering solution immediately created a brand new, disastrous problem for the actors. The blimped cameras were now so physically gigantic, we're talking about a black box the size of a household appliance, that when they positioned them close to the actors to film intimate close-ups, the actors couldn't even see past the camera.
It created a physical wall.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to deliver a deeply emotional, tearful, career-defining monologue to your scene partner. You need to look into their eyes to react to their subtle facial expressions,
Right.
but all you can see in front of you is a giant, black, soundproof box blocking your entire field of vision. You cannot make eye contact.
It's a total isolation chamber. So how do they act? I mean, it's like they built a multi-million-dollar periscope, right?
That is exactly what they built.
Right.
The engineering team rigged a highly complex system of high-quality mirrors on the front of the soundproof blimps, positioned just out of the lens's field of view.
That is so smart.
This ingenious rig allowed actors like Matt Damon and Anne Hathaway to look directly into the mirrors and see each other's reflections in real time.
That is absolutely wild. You have an unprecedented state-of-the-art IMAX camera, essentially fixed with a mirror hack you might use to look around a corner in a submarine or a funhouse.
Exactly.
They maintained that crucial emotional human connection by staring at a reflection of their scene partner while looking directly down the barrel of the lens.
But the technical hurdles of IMAX didn't stop at the noise in the mirrors. There is an even more demanding constraint.
Oh, yeah.
The 3-minute rule.
Oh, this blew my mind. Explain the 3-minute rule.
Because IMAX film is so physically large, and because it runs through the camera so quickly, a fully loaded magazine of film only holds about 3 minutes of footage before it physically runs out.
Wow.
Think about the implications of that for an actor.
Yeah.
Imagine you are Matt Damon. You are in the middle of a highly intense, emotionally draining, incredibly nuanced 8-page dialogue scene recounting the horrors of the Trojan War.
Okay.
You get 3 minutes in. You have worked yourself up. You are crying. Your heart is pounding. You are entirely in the zone. And then mechanically, the camera just clicks empty. The director yells, "Cut, reload."
Man, this specific technical constraint requires an immense, almost superhuman amount of discipline from the cast.
It really does.
During these mandatory reloads, the entire set protocol changed. The set had to remain in absolute pin-drop silence. The actors could not drop character, they could not stretch, they could not chat.
Not at all.
They had to hold their intense emotional state completely frozen in that dark psychological space, while the camera crew frantically scrambled in the dark to unlatch the blimp, remove the heavy, spent film magazine, and thread a new one.
It's like a theatrical stage freeze, but instead of the lights going down, you have heavy machinery operating mere inches from your face.
But I have to ask, as someone who watches movies for the human performance, how does that constant mechanical interruption not completely derail the raw human emotion Nolan is trying to capture? It seems like it would totally shatter an actor's concentration.
It is a tremendous risk, and for a lesser director or a less disciplined cast, it would be a disaster. But what happens in a Nolan production is that the immense technical constraint actually forces a hyper-focused, elevated environment. Everyone on that set, the actors, the grips, the lighting team, knows exactly how precious and expensive that film stock is. They know how limited their window
Those
is.
takes.
It creates a pressure cooker environment that counterintuitively distills and sharpens the performances. The actors aren't relaxing or losing focus between takes. They're actively living inside the tension of the machinery.
And to manage this incredibly cumbersome, massive analog workflow, they had to invent a bridge to the digital world. They actually mounted modern Blackmagic digital monitors directly on top of the analog IMAX viewfinders.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, this gave the crew a high-resolution, real-time video assist, allowing them to digitally evaluate the lighting and framing of a format that usually takes days to develop in a lab. It's this mind-bending bridge between 15 perforation, mid-20th century analog film chemistry and cutting-edge digital evaluation.
That blending of the ancient and the modern, the mechanical and the emotional, extends right into the sonic landscape of the film as well. We have to talk about Ludwig Göransson's score.
Göransson, who obviously won the Oscar for his incredible panic-inducing work on Oppenheimer, returned to score the Odyssey. And he made a choice that I still cannot believe the studio signed off on.
Yeah.
He used absolutely zero orchestral instruments. None.
Which is an incredibly daring, almost reckless choice for a $250 million historical epic.
Completely.
We have been conditioned by 80 years of Hollywood filmmaking to associate the ancient mythic world with sweeping string sections, soaring violins, and massive triumphant brass ensembles. Think of Ben-Hur, Gladiator, or Troy.
Right.
Stripping away the orchestra removes that deeply ingrained emotional shortcut for the audience. He refused to hold the audience's hand musically.
So if you don't have strings and brass, what do you use to score a Bronze Age epic? He relied heavily on driving, pulsing modern synthesizers, which obviously did not exist in the ancient world, and he seamlessly mixed them with actual historically accurate ancient instruments that they painstakingly reconstructed.
Yeah.
Specifically, he used the lyre and an instrument called the aulos.
The aulos is compelling.
He actually referred to the aulos in an interview as the rock star instrument of antiquity. It's a double-reeded wind instrument that sounds a bit like an oboe mixed with the aggressive drone of a bagpipe.
It's a very unique sound.
The resulting soundscape, the pulsing analog synths underneath the piercing ancient wail of the aulos, creates a sonic environment that feels incredibly ancient, deeply unsettling, and completely alien to our modern ears.
And we simply cannot talk about creating an alien, unsettling world without talking about the literal monsters.
Yes, let's go there.
If the psychological trauma is the internal monster, Nolan still had to deliver the physical threats of the myth, specifically the Cyclops, Polyphemus.
Right. And true to his absolute disdain for green screens, Nolan eschewed CGI for the creature. They didn't put a guy in a motion capture suit with dots on his face. They built a massive 60-foot-tall practical Cyclops.
It utilized a combination of towering practical animatronics, forced perspective, and massive puppetry. The creature's movements and facial expressions were operated in part by the legendary physical actor and clown Bill Irwin, translating human microexpressions into this giant mechanical rig.
That's incredible.
But what is truly haunting is the visual design. It didn't look like a standard, muscular movie monster or a fantasy video game boss. Nolan and his design team were heavily influenced by Francisco Goya's horrifying, grotesque painting, Saturn Devouring His Son.
Oh, man. If you haven't seen that painting, look it up. It is pure nightmare fuel. It depicts a wild-eyed, disheveled god chewing the flesh off a human body in the dark.
It's deeply disturbing.
So combine all of this. You have a 60-foot practical animatronic puppet inspired by a nightmare painting, screaming with a synthetic metallic sound design being shot on 70mm IMAX film inside a real dripping cave in the mountains of Greece with actors who have been starved and exhausted.
Yeah.
That is filmmaking on a scale and with a physical commitment that almost does not exist in the industry anymore.
It is extreme engineering strictly in service of myth-making. Every logistical nightmare they engineered, every physical hardship they forced the crew to endure, was meticulously designed to ensure the audience could feel the unbearable weight of this journey in their own bones.
So as we finally wrap up this colossal deep dive, we've looked at the fractured psychology, the PTSD, the unprecedented engineering, the brutal global locations, and the 20-year obsession that willed this into existence.
We covered a lot.
What does this all ultimately mean for you listening right now? We aren't fighting monsters in caves? How does this ancient story, filtered through Nolan's massive lens, apply to us today?
I think Nolan's vision of the Odyssey suggests something deeply profound and universally relevant. The film posits that the true monsters in our lives aren't the one-eyed giants or the mythical sea beasts.
Right.
The true unavoidable monsters are the crushing guilt and the inevitable consequences of our own deceptions. Remember, Odysseus' ultimate punishment for the tactical brilliance of the Trojan horse wasn't a quick death in battle.
No, it wasn't.
His punishment was the loss of his home, the alienation of his family, and a decade of painful, disorienting wandering.
Yeah.
It leaves us with a piercing question to examine in our own lives. If we violate the fundamental trust of the people around us, if we break our own versions of Xenia to get ahead, what are the Trojan horses we are building in our own lives?
Oh, wow.
And more importantly, what long, painful, isolating journeys will those deceptions eventually force us to take before we can ever truly find our way back home?
A heavy, deeply fascinating thought to leave on. And that wraps our journey through the Odyssey. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Roll Credits and share it with your fellow movie fans. And let us know what film we should cover next, old or new. We'll be back soon with more trivia, more movie magic, and maybe a few more adventures waiting just beyond the horizon.